Now, for more on the influence millennials have on the economy in China and around the world, I'm joined by Michael Zakkour, the Vice President of the China and Asia Pacific practice at Tomkins International. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Rachelle. It's good to be back on the show.
Now, China's young adults outnumber the entire working population of the US and Western Europe combined. So what's their impact overall on the Chinese economy?
Well, they're a cornerstone driver of the new Chinese economy. I mean, the emphasis on the new Chinese economy is on two sectors, consumption and services. And they are powering what we call the age of China's super consumers. Their spending power reverberates not only in China, but around the entire world. And so we're seeing massive growth in Chinese consumption and those sectors and the service industries. We're talking about from babies to young kids who have, parents and four grandparents spending money on them, to young adults, millennials who are shaping the way brands are thinking about their global activities. They're buying everything from iPhones to Coach handbags to Huawei phones. I mean, they are the driver of the new Chinese economy.
Now, let's break some of that down. Let's start with consumption. Just how much purchasing power do they have, and what are their consumption habits like?
Well, as we heard previously in the piece, their consumption habits right now are almost entirely online. They look for products online, they look to be entertained online, and all of that, by the way, is mobile. Roughly 75% of consumer products bought by China's youth are done in a mobile environment. And so smart companies like Alibaba, like JD, like Tencent are using the power of technology, digital operations, and the integration of entertainment with commerce to reach them.
And just how much influence are things like social media having? I know we mentioned this concept of influencers. How much attention are brands paying to that now?
Well, in China, social media is the primary customer relationship venue. It's where you're going to get to know your customer, where they're going to get to know you. You're going to be able to demonstrate your products. And as we saw also previously, sales in China, especially of technology products, are driven by peer recommendation. And so these influencers, we call them KOLs, key opinion leaders, are vital to introducing new products and new ideas to China's millennials. And so social media and KOLs are really the only game in town if you want to reach them, communicate them, and build long-term relationships with them.
Now, let's also look at some of the challenges that Chinese millennials are facing. What's really weighing on them at the moment?
Well, what's amazing to me, and having been in China for 16 years, I've always talked about how China and the U.S. have much, much more in common than they are different. And so I think what we're seeing is a lot of the same issues. China's got the most educated class in a generation in their history. The U.S. has the most educated class and generation in their history. But both cohorts of millennials are finding it hard to find good paying jobs. Housing costs are skyrocketing in both countries. The ability to get married is largely dependent on finding a mate, but being able to buy a home traditionally in China. And so if you can't afford a home, you can't get married. So I think we're also seeing much more of an emphasis on consumption, but not just material consumption, but the consumption of experiences and living an authentic life. And I see that on both sides of the ocean.
Now, to that point, we know that millennials are often blamed or sometimes credited for affecting an entire range of products and sectors. In your opinion, what are really the key industries across the global economy that they're having the biggest impact on?
Well, I think certainly technology, number one. So if we look at the consumption and use of consumer electronics, also the fast-growing sector of e-commerce, which is called cross-border e-commerce. And so cross-border commerce is right now about a $350 billion industry. By 2020, cross-border e-commerce will be $1 trillion. And so the ability of Chinese millennials to buy from anywhere in the world, and because they're sophisticated and connected, we're going to see economies around the world and brands and retailers around the world grow and transform through the power of the Chinese millennial connected consumer.
Now, clearly, everyone is taking a different path historically. We know that Chinese millennials grew up at a time when China was really opening up its market and having its key economic reforms. How does their experience compare to, say, the US, Europe, and other regions going forward?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there was a shoulder generation born from about 1985 to 1990 who knew a little bit of the old and emerging China. And then there was a group born after 1990, and they've known only a rising, more powerful China, a China that is re-emerging on the world stage. And so their views are very much shaped by the China that they know today, not the China that used to be.
Right.
I think what you can also see is a little bit different is they are excited. They're a nation on the rise. They're more tech savvy. They've skipped over a lot of the cultural, technological, and consumer legacy systems that we've had in the West. And so I think there's a bit more energy on that side of the ocean, but they also still look very much towards the West, not to westernize, but to modernize.
All right, thank you. We'll have to leave it there. Michael Zakkour, Vice President of the China and Asia Pacific Practice at Tomkins International.